Hello there. Today I'm going to be walking you through the latest update to the archive. As you can see by the title here, we're going to be removing a couple of duds. So let's get going. I received feedback both from the Cube Talk Discord and some members of my local play group that a few cards in the cube were feeling like they weren't really living up to their potential, or at least, underperforming in this cube. So you can see them on the right here. We have a giant spider. This is an oldie but a goodie. It breaks my heart to hear that this thing can't actually hang, even in a low-powered cube like the archive, but 2/4 for 4, even with reach, isn't great even as a sideboard card. There is a lot of flying right now, especially in white in the archive. I'm not sure there's enough to justify Giant Spider, unfortunately. Moving along, we have Maga, Trader to Mortals. I made a mistake. Maga's just bad. I'm sorry. You can't cast him for 3. For 3 you get a 0/0 that would die immediately. So this is a fake 3-drop. If you pay 4 mana, black, 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 and 1, you get a 1/1 that drains your opponent for 1, and that just doesn't hold up in this environment. I'm not actually sure what I was thinking when I added Mega, so we're going to cut him. Moving on, we have Soul Warden and Greed on the bottom row here, and in earlier versions of the archive, there was a life use package in the cube. It largely failed to live up to what I wanted from it, and I cut it in the last version. I thought Soul Warden and Greed might still be able to hang, but they really don't. They don't stand alone. They don't do enough, so we're going to cut them as well. So I've listed out the sets impacted. As you'll recall, the archive is a cube that has 3 cards, or a minimum 3 cards from each standard legal set. So we have Saviors of Kamigawa, Exodus, 6th edition, and 7th edition impacted by this proposed change. So here's a little bit of how my process works when I'm making a change like this. We start by assessing the impact to our cube restriction, that 3 cards per standard legal set. Some questions I need to ask myself is, do I have other cards that can fill the voids that are already in the cube somehow? I use Cogwork Librarian, so maybe I'll just pop out and show you how I do that. Cogwork Librarian has the ability to import a cube. In my case, we have the archive in here. And then you can actually run searches on the cube. I know you can do this through Cube Cobra. I find it a lot easier through Cogwork. So we can just look, for example, at Exodus, and you can see that we have 5 Exodus cards in the cube. That doesn't mean they're all allocated to Exodus in the archive, just that we could maybe fill some gaps from there. We also had Saviors of Kamigawa, which is always a tough set to fill. There's only 3 there, so this is going to be a problem. And then 6th and 7th edition are pretty early Magic sets, and I have plenty of cards to choose from. Of course, because all these cards, or most of these cards, have been reprinted many, many times, they may already be allocated to different sets. So I usually have to cross-reference this information here with the master spreadsheet for the archive. This here shows the different sets and what the allocations are, and at the bottom has all the extras where I've got cards in excess of the 3 per set. So if we hop back to what we're doing here, when I did my analysis, I found that I was indeed able to move an Exodus card up into the empty slot vacated by the cut to the Soul Warden. So that was Ephemeron. So that was easy enough. And then I had Jalem Tome and the Prodigal Sorcerer associated with Antiquities and Alpha, respectively, and I could move those to 6th and 7th edition where they were reprinted. You can see the Prodigal Sorcerer art here. It's, with apologies to the artist, kind of terrible compared to the OG Timmy art. I'm going to not actually update my cube with this version of the Sorcerer. I need to keep the original one. So once I've done that, we need to uphold our restrictions. So we got lucky in this case. Only Saviors of Kamigawa needs a new card. The other 3 replacements I can actually fill from that extras section at the bottom of my spreadsheet. But I've found over time that Kamigawa block is really tough to find good cards for. And a lot of that is because the entire block is filled full of parasitic mechanics. You can actually hear Mark Rosewater talk about this as he reviews the sets on his Drive to Work podcast. So if we look specifically at Saviors, the mechanics that hold that set together are Arcane and Splice onto Arcane. If you don't know that mechanic, it's kind of like you cast 2 spells together, but you get to keep the card that you're splicing, assuming you've paid the costs. It's a little bit weird, usually expensive and inefficient, and notably Arcane and Splice are only found in the set. There's a Spirits Matter sub-theme. We're not really doing anything with spirits throughout throughout the archive. So those two mechanics were present through all of Kamigawa, and then Saviors of Kamigawa added a concept called sweeps. Sweeping is when you cast a spell, you pick up X lands, and then you do something based on that. A wisdom, this goes along with sweeps. The cards you cast get better based on however many cards you have in your hand at the time you cast them. So the play pattern there is you cast a sweep, pick up a bunch of lands, cast a wisdom card. The card has an amplified effect because you've picked up a bunch of your lands. Picking up lands is just not something we want to do, so let's not do that mechanic at all. And then there's epic. An epic spell is a spell that you cast, and then after that you can't cast any other spells for the rest of the game. That feels like a terrible experience in Limited. And then the last mechanic we have is Channel. Channel is a fine mechanic. We have some Channel in the cube already, so we can consider some of that. But as you can see, there's a ton of mechanics that make up this Saviors of Kamigawa set that we just don't want to use. So that makes it tough. So what I settled on after looking through the cards was I'm going to swap out Greed, which was allocated to 7th edition, with Death Denied. Death Denied is actually a cool spell. It's a form of card advantage. It's black, black X, return X target creature cards from your graveyard to the hand. So assuming you're either getting your creatures into combat or self-milling or something like that, this is a form of card advantage. We have a self-mill package, so that's good. There's also a Leaves the Graveyard package seeded through mostly Sultai. So cards like Insidious Roots and Kishla Skimmer appreciate a Death Denied. And notably it's instant speed, so that's great for the more controlling decks in the archive. Death Denied is not in very many cubes. When I looked it up, only 1.62% of cubes play Death Denied. So now that we've filled in the gaps, the next step is to fill in the extra spots, and this is a lot easier. I can use literally any set to fill an extra spot. But what I want to do, one of the goals of the archive, is to really have it feel like you're playing with older cards alongside new cards. So whenever I'm looking to fill an extra spot, I always attempt to fill it with the oldest card I can find that meets my goals. So if you want to know how to do that on Scryfall, you can just go order released in direction ascending, ASC. On Cogwork Librarian, it's a little bit easier. I'll show it at the top in a second. It's just order released. And after the cuts we made, the gaps I need to fill are a white 1-drop creature, a black 3-drop creature, and a green 4-drop creature. I'm going to hold pretty firm to the white and black low-drop creatures. The green could be a 4 or more greater CMC creature. I think green is typically stompy. So before we get to that swap, I'll kind of show you how we go about looking for old cards first on Cogwork. So I mentioned that that you can set up the order. So I have a default domain defined at the very top of Cogwork Librarian, and I do have order : released. I have some other things that I have set up at the top here. I don't want extra cards from sets. I want to make sure the cards are all on paper, etc. One of these days I'll make a video that actually goes through how I set up all of my default filters on Cogwork to make it useful. So if we want to look for white 1-drops, it's a pretty easy Scryfall search that we're going to use in here. So I have this use simplified, which is a filter I've already set up that kind of filters out bad mechanics, only looks at standard cards, a lot of other things. But just do a Scryfall search in here. So color is white and type is creature, and mana value is 1. So we can run that search, and as I said, things are in oldest to newest order. Alright, so right away I see a card that is near and dear to my heart in Savannah Lions. It's a 2/1 for 1 white. No other text, and Tundra Wolves. I loved playing with these cards back when I was a teenager, first getting into Magic. So we'll definitely be considering those. But one of the things that you'll find when you look through old Magic cards is the creatures are terrible. Most of these are just 1/1s, often with abilities that aren't very relevant, and it makes it hard to fill in these spots. So I'm not going to go through everything, but as you saw over here, what I finally settled on was Arcazan Squire, and this is played in 0.58% of cubes, so pretty obscure, and it's from Shards of Alara. Arcazan Squire is a 1 white for a 1/1, and it has Exalted. I like Exalted in small doses. I find the mechanic changes combat in an interesting way. It's an attacks alone trigger, so it just gives +1/+1 to a creature if it attacks alone. If you have multiple Exalted things on the battlefield, that obviously gives +2/+2, +3/+3, etc. There's only one other Exalted card in this cube. It's a land, but having another one isn't bad. And I guess the other thing that's nice about Exalted is it rewards you for including evasive keywords in your deck. Flying, menace, stuff like that. I guess double strike, first striker, sort of evasion. Alright, so moving on to swap number 2. Maga, we are going to swap out. As I said, Maga was a mistake. And we're going to try and swap Maga out for a real 3-drop because we really can't cast Maga on 3. What I've settled on is, again, an oldie and a goodie here. This is from Apocalypse, and it's the Phyrexian Rager. 2 and a black for a 2/2. When it comes into the battlefield, you draw a card and lose a life. I like Rager because it gives a little bit more card flow in black, and I find that card flow in your 1, 2, and 3 drops is important to getting more actual games of Magic played. Also, I have some flicker cards in white, and I did receive feedback that maybe a few more flicker targets would be useful. So Phyrexian Rager drawing a card every time it comes in is great, and obviously this is an iconic card, so we'll go ahead and include the Phyrexian Rager. And then finally, swap 4. Poor old giant spider, his time has come. And coming in with the most obscure card here is Barishi. Barishi's from Weatherlight, and as I was going through my cube, one thing I noticed was that my green 4-drop slot wasn't very beefy at all. In fact, I was surprised how kind of anemic 4-drops were in the archive. So ignoring Barishi, who's already in here, I had the Eidolon of Blossoms as a 2/2 enchantment payoff. The Rhino's beefy. Kavu Primarch can be beefy. Can be a 7/7 if you kick him. Ravenous Balos a 4/4, but then like the Seed Guardian's a 3/4, the Vizier is a 3/4, Wildheart Invoker's a 4/3. So I didn't have I had too many with the Giant Spider in here, cards that just wouldn't play into Green's beatdown plan. And again, like with white 1-drops in older Magic, green cards that are green creatures specifically that are 4 or more mana, so we can just bang that in here, are really, really terrible early on. I wish I could play Crawworm. I've tried before, it just doesn't work. You know, these cards are mostly overcosted for what they do. You know, here's a Theorathian Treefolk, 5 mana 3/5. Dirkwood Boar is a 5 mana 4/4. The Wombat, a 4 mana 0/1, and so on. So I was quite pleased when I found Barishi just hanging out in the Weatherlight card file, because, you know, it's 4 mana 4/3, a little bit below rate, but fine for this cube. Notably, it has some interesting synergy, again, with the Leaves the Graveyard package that I described earlier. So when Barishi's put into any graveyard from play, you both remove Barishi from the game, but also you shuffle all your creature cards from your graveyard into your library. So this has the effect of triggering Insidious Root, Kishla Skimmer, things like that, and increasing the density of action in your deck, which is important in the late game. So yeah, this is a wonderfully janky card, and I really like it. And the fact that it's so obscure, played in 0.11% of cubes, just is an extra bonus. So here's the summary. We took out Giant Spider, Maga, Soul Warden, and Greed, and we put in Barishi, Phyrexian Raider, Arcasian Squire, and Death Denied. That is all I have today. Thank you for watching.